everyone, welcome back to another art time lapse. Today's painting is called A Ride Through the Magical Forest. So this piece, I must admit, when I first started, I didn't really know what I was doing. So I must say, even at the end, I'm not totally convinced that that was my initial plan, but sometimes that's how it works out for your art piece. It doesn't work out perfectly, and that's what I want to show in some of my videos in my YouTube channel, that like not every single piece is going to come out beautiful, it's not going to come out perfectly, and I want to show my process, whether I do very well or I struggle through it. So for this piece, it's actually based on acrylic wash. So I'm watering down my acrylic wash and I'm painting onto a watercolor block. So here I started off with like an apricot wash on the back, and then I'm just slowly adding in, starting with like the main characters in the painting. I knew I wanted a little girl who's gonna be riding on a unicorn. Was not sure how like the background was gonna look, but a lot of times when I paint, I love being focused on the main character, like my favorite part of the painting. And I think about the background afterwards. I don't know if that's always the best way to do it. I think overall, my most successful painting usually comes from a thought, like a concept, an idea or a message I'm trying to convey. And then from there, I create a story around my piece. The story usually involves the main character, but also like the surrounding that encompasses the drawing, because I think that the environment that they're in also makes such a huge stake in overall how the vibe, how the mood turns out for the painting. So I feel like this painting is not like a best representation of like how to go about doing a piece. I think it's really important to start by thinking about like what is the story, what is the vibe. So for this piece, I just want to get started and start painting. So with that said, I started doing like these branches, and I'm like, I'll just figure it out, the artwork will tell me, and sometimes it just doesn't work that way. So as you'll see, I actually end up painting or over painting some of these designs and trees later on. But at this time, I was just like, it will go well, just like it'll just work itself out, and it really did not. So here you can see I'm adding some blue leaves, some red leaves, and like I feel like the color scheme is not exactly something I was comfortable with. It's like these really polar, strong primary colors that I don't know if like red and green is, or sorry, red and blue is like my vibe. So you can see slowing it down, I'm like trying to fix it, because usually like I love painting with blues. It's like my happy, easy, relaxed go-to color, but today I was like, let's go adventurous and try some like reds, and it just didn't really work out well. So I decided to start like painting over some of the reds, hoping that like I can still save the artwork. I knew I wanted this ride on this unicorn to be like going through a magical like forest or something like in the woods, but I didn't know or have a good picture of how the woods would look like. So being uncomfortable with the background, I decided to go back to painting the main character, and I want this little girl to be holding like this magical star that's glowing, and she's just cradling it in her hand. If you've seen some of my previous painting, you know I love a good kind of whimsical, dreamy vibe, and that's what I was hoping to go for this piece. Here the girl is holding the star and it's glowing in her hand. So here you can see, let's see what I can do to save it. I'm trying to add some green for the foliage, and I think that the green, the red, and the blue is just like not the right shade. So going back, I think one of the things I would recommend is that like come up with like a general color scheme for what you would want for your piece before starting. Limiting your color palette can be really helpful, because sometimes it can be really overwhelming given that there are just so many color options. So here I try to wash out some of the green. You can see like it's not as vibrant as before, but like it's still there. But for me, I was thinking, okay, if I'm going for like a dreamy, a more whimsical vibe, I think like a lilac or maybe like a blue, that kind of color scheme would look really beautiful. So as you can see, I'm just painting over some of the previous layers. So for some of the stronger colors, I actually use white gouache to paint over it, and then painting over with like another layer of paint. So that's one of the things I really love about gouache. It's very forgiving, it's very opaque. So what that means is if you don't like what you painted before, you can paint over it once it dries. So that's one big tip that I love about gouache, that I have the freedom to repaint it if it doesn't work out. So you can see, starting off with the main characters, I'm just working my way out from the unicorn and the little girl itself, hoping that I can salvage the piece. It's almost like they're walking through this magical forest, and then this bright shining star that the little girl is holding is creating or parting the leaves and the trees and creating a path for them. So my plan is that I'm gonna make the foliage, the leaves, a little bit darker the further out they are away from the characters, and a little bit lighter the closer you are to the character itself. So you can see I'm just like layering on some of the purples on top of the previous layers of red and green that did not work out. And surprisingly, I think like it's looking okay. So like I said, this is an example of a piece that like did not go exactly smoothly, partially because I didn't have a very good solid concept. As a result, I feel like I went through like a very deep rabbit hole trying to salvage a piece. Thinking back in the future, one thing I would recommend for fellow artists is like, before going and starting a piece, have a clear idea, have a clear intention of how you plan on pursuing it, what your message is before painting it, because like sometimes it just ends up resulting of a lot of like going backwards, and like it's a little bit frustrating. But sometimes like it's also very freeing to kind of like paint what you want. So here I'm just showing you a slow down look at some of the leaves as I'm adding on, because sometimes I think when I do art time lapse it looks like, oh wow, this is like happening really quickly, but like you can see I'm actually just doing one leaf at a time. And for gouache, when it dries, darker colors dry a little lighter. So despite this like dark cobalt blue mixed with a little bit of purple looks pretty dark, when it dries actually is a little bit lighter. So something to be cautious of. So I'm doing some leaves that are like darker, that are further away from the main characters. And I think that creates a nice dimension to the piece rather than like two-dimensional, looks really flat. And I'll speed things up. I think overall for this piece, I think I spent several weeks on it, just because like I went back and forth debating about the color scheme and like how the background was gonna look. Right now it still looks really messy to me and it doesn't look refined. Hoping that once I added some of the darker shades, create more depth and create a piece that is like a little bit more wholesome and it will look more complete. So going back to my main characters, I'm just creating these outlines that match with the color scheme for the background. Again, like I love drawing the main characters, so like this is actually quite relaxing for me. And this unicorn, I actually am not doing like the full face of the unicorn. I'm also pondering about like the vibe I'm trying to come up with here. Like the girl is very like obviously very happy holding this glowing star, but like the unicorn, I don't feel like it's in like an absolutely wonderful happy mood. If anything, it looks a little bit tired holding like this girl on its back and walking through this forest. And I wonder like what kind of message is this painting trying to tell about like sometimes our own happiness. We kind of forget those around us. So after I add some highlights, you notice how much like the characters pop so much more. Here adding some darker shades of purple. I think this piece is actually coming out quite nicely. It's not necessarily a piece I plan on selling, it's just a piece for fun. So I hope you enjoy this art time lapse of this ride through the woods, ride through this magical forest. Thank you so much for joining me on this art time lapse, and hopefully I will see you next time. Take care and stay creative, everyone. Bye for now.